And a good evening to you.
And a good evening to you. I have with me the gentleman that did the signing at Mandela's funeral. And
I've actually learned how to forge his signature. If anyone would like an autograph, Go ahead. Take over.
Okay, I'm taking over. Hi, my name's Hal Cannon, and thank you. And I've been asked to ask you to sort of move in and get friendly in the middle, if you would. Like Baxter's getting friendly in the middle, too. Sorry. So, yeah, we have a lot of people that are at dinner yet, and so if you could move in a little bit, that would be grand. So you're about to hear some great poetry. Okay, I guess I gave them license to talk.
You've lost the crowd already,
I've lost the crowd. Okay, maybe if you could move to the center silently, we'll begin tonight's program. So tonight we are going to hear a lot of good poetry, and I'm not sure if this is the congregation or the choir that's going to be here. We got Baxter so far, and he's sitting on that side. Good, okay. So I'm going to bring everyone that's going to recite a poem out here, and then I'm going to tell you a little bit about the concept of tonight's evening of poetry. First, I'd like to introduce to you Chris Isaacs. Come on out, Chris. And then Yvonne Hollenbeck, Ross Knox, Waddie Mitchell, Joel Nelson, Randy Rieman, Georgie Sicking coming out with Jesse Smith. Come on out, Georgie and Jesse. And then after that, it's going to be Gail Steiger. Now we got Georgie Sicking and Jesse Smith. And then we have Gail Steiger. And then I was supposed to announce the unruly Baxter Black. And then Bill Jones, Jerry Brooks, and Vess Quinlan. Oh, wow. So tonight's program is sponsored by Nevada Energy. Thank you, Nevada Energy, for sponsoring this show. I'd like to tell you a little bit about the 30th gathering. From the beginning, we conceived, or the Western Folklife Center staff, I said we, I've been retired for 2 years. I'm just watching. But I do know where the restrooms are. This was conceived as an anniversary to both celebrate the past and celebrate the next 30 years. So there's been a lot of young performers. I've noticed that there's a lot of younger people in the audience this year. I think it's fantastic. And tonight we're going to recite poems from people who are gone, but so beloved to us and to people who have been coming to the Cowboy Poetry Gathering. And this is not a night to mourn the people we've lost. We know that every year we'll leave here and we'll come back and a handful of people will be gone that we love and admire. This is an art form that I've noticed over the 30 years that I've been involved that's not based on competition, but it's based on love and admiration. And that's what tonight's about, is love and admiration for the poetry of the people that have gone on. And Chris, so this is a celebration, and it truly is. Chris Isaacs came up with a concept, which is the phrase, tracks blowed out. I love that phrase because it's about the fact that when you have a trail or a track going through, sand or snow can blow it out. And it's one thing that we can do as humans is we can procreate and leave a family behind, but also we can leave behind our words, and we can leave behind our values and our thoughts, and we can pass them on. And that is what cowboy poetry is about tonight. So I'd like to say very little. We're just going to go down the line and hear a bunch of wonderful poetry. So it's going to start at this end with Chris Isaacs. Bring him up here with a round of applause. Thank you.
This is a poem by Ray Owens. It's called Tracks That Won't Blow Out. I didn't know him all that long, and maybe not that well, because how good you really know someone is sometimes hard to tell. But there's one thing that's for certain. There ain't the slightest doubt. He left some memories in my mind and left some tracks that won't blow out. And she was something extra special when I knew her way back when. Over 40 years have passed now, but I still remember when she was young and sweet, shy. Sweetest thing for miles about. That memory still walks through my mind, leaving tracks that won't blow out. You know, there's been a lot of happenings that have passed down through the years. Some that brought some laughter and others brought some tears. It's getting on towards evening now. The sunset could be soon. But somehow I'm still feeling like it's early afternoon. I guess that's because of being blessed with having lots of friends and some understanding family on whose love I can depend. But you know, if I was going to ride this trail again and travel the same route, I think maybe I'd try a little harder to leave some tracks that won't blow out. Ray Owens.
I feel so honored to get to do a poem of Leon Flick. He was a cowboy's cowboy from Plush, Oregon. The poem I chose was called The Team, and this is Leon's own explanation of writing. I was traveling home late one night, and I turned onto the last 30 miles of gravel road towards Plush. It was snowing hard, and the road was drifting. I was wondering if I should stay on the oil or take the long way home when the words of Tom Anderson came to me. Where's your pioneer spirit? Think they turned back just because they hit a little snow? As I broke those drifts across the cutoff, I got to thinking of my grandparents, how they had followed a team of horses to Colorado and homesteaded, how they had been married and pulling together for 76 years. And of my own parents, how many times when the road of life got a little bit murky, they made it by pulling together. I stopped and I wrote The Team. All my life with even tugs, they've leaned into the collar. You always picked up the lines and spoke, you never whipped or hollered. You treated them with due respect. They gave it back tenfold. It seems the tougher that things got, the harder that team pulled. I've seen them bust through chest-high drifts and pull high water too, and if you cared to watch for them, they'd teach some things to you. I've seen them inches off the ground and sway to get one started, and I have been responsible for some heavy loads they carted. For 50 years, they've been side by side. They've never left the other. And please, God, take an open hand my father and my mother. Leon Flick.
I know this is streaming, so Andrea, Abigail, if you're watching this, we miss you. Good Lord, what a dink. I thought to myself as the boss said, put that black colt in your string. I've rode lots of duds, but none quite compared to this pitifully ugly poor thing. Well, Taylor, he read me just like the good book. Probably felt the same way, but his heart beat soft for children and colts, so he took a moment to say, "Just give him a chance to prove himself, son. You asked that of me when you hired. Find out his limits, bring him on slow, don't get him too mad or too tired. Just look at that eye, all shiny and bright. He won't win no prize in a ring, but there's something about him I kinda like. And out here, show points don't mean a thing." Well, the boys was all grinning when I roped him out, and we went to the pen that was round. My face sure got red when I pulled up my cinch and he squealed and fell to the ground. And thus we began our rocky romance, not much liking each other at all. But somehow, that colt was ready to go when we started working cattle that fall. Well, I hadn't hung a tag on him yet, but name him I figured I'd ought, and there was but one thing that came to my mind, so I dubbed him the title Black Drought. Well, he put on a whole lot of muscle and bone. By the end of our third working season, the boys was still grinning at my little black horse, but now for a different reason. Ever alert, he was eager to learn. A pretty good horse he'd made. One day, he even outcut Taylor's ace. It was then the boss offered a trade. I thought for a minute, but then I said no. Although it made me feel good, but hell would freeze over and pigs would fly before he packed another man's wood. In the evenings, after we finished the chores, he'd taxi me up to the house. No saddle, no bridle, just denim on hide. Then he, with a hose I'd douse. I guess you could say we made quite a team, but friends, he was far from a pet. If I'd fall asleep or things is just right, he'd still try to pile me off yet. Well, time come, the air split up the old ranch, and though I'm not adverse to change, they started to ruin a good place in my mind, so I went in search of new range. Well, the time had come for good friends to part ways, so I went to tell him goodbye. I stroked his dark hide and I felt a wet cheek. I must have got sand in my eye. Well, he nuzzled my shoulder and he nipped at my sleeve. He'd not seen me like this before. The realization has just hit me square. We'd be together no more. Well, I'd seen and done a whole lot of things in the years since I left him behind. But no matter how hard I pushed him away, he clung to my heart and my mind. Well, I seen an old friend in Childress one night. And though it might have seemed tacky, before I inquired of his wife and his kids, I said, "Tell me, Dave, how's Blackie?" Well, the look I'd not seen come over his face. He reached down and got me a beer, and with a hand on my back, he led me away. He says, "Let's go talk over here." Well, a few weeks ago, we had a big storm, and clouds were a horrible sight. The rain beat hard, wind was blowing, and the lightning was flashing all night. Next morning, we went out to do the chores, and Blackie, who was always in first, never showed up with the rest of the bunch. We started to fear for the worst. Well, Taylor and I rode out and found him. He was lying alone on a hill. And Hoss, there is no good way to tell you, except to say that he's lying there still. You know, a funny thing happened with that little horse. He was sure good with you there, but after you left, he turned for the worse. It was like he just didn't care. He'd hang around the bunkhouse all day or aimlessly wander around. I always thought he was looking for you, but he is nowhere to be found. Why, to see the way that little horse wilted sure would have tore you apart. And I'll always believe that that quick lightning bolt gave rest to a poor broken heart. Well, I stood there a while and I let it soak in. My little black horse had gone home. And I'll always wonder if he'd be alive if I'd just fought that fool urge to roam. Good horses abound and run through my mind, but he's the main memory I've got. He wasn't the best, but he was my ace, and I sure do miss him a lot. So if you should see fit to call me home, Lord, and you have a cow work in the spring, I'd sure take it kindly. When you hand out the mounts, if you could put Blackie back in my string. Larry McWhorter.
Larry McWhorter, yeah. What a guy. Another guy, one of my closest partners, Rod McQuarrie, penned this and many years ago gave it to me and said, "Would you do this for me?" And I said, "No." And he said, "No, really, I can't do it, and I wish you would." This is for Woody. From the snowdrift in the canyon behind the granite and the pinyon, past the trout and beaver, where young Quakies crowd to share. From the icy plaster caked across the mountain goat's dominion comes the lifeblood of our valley as it tumbles down from there. And it gurgles, it almost chuckles past the granite and the boulders. Cheerfully it detours through the ditches man might make with only gravity its master. It always knows which way to travel, warm and foamy, ever downward through the slough and toward the lake. And there the bulrush stopped the ripples where the sheets of ice lay dying. The waxing sun shows promise that the winter's lost its sting. Overhead the floating regiment of geese formations flying driven northward to their nesting grounds by instinct every spring. In one pasture by the water, tired, pinching horses wander. They wait for my alfalfa and the sun to conquer cold. In this middle ground between active duty and the promise yonder, they don't care too much for scenery. They're thin and tired and old. Last among these pensioners, one sorrel gelding stumbles with swollen knees and seedy toe. You can see why he's so lame. He's lost his youth, but not his dignity. He would die before he humbles. He's my dad's top saddle horse, and Woody is his name. I never cared for Woody. Not the kind of horse I cling to. He's hard to catch and fussy, and he never made a pet. But he could jump at cattle, and that was one thing that he would do. He had the heart of giants. I can still recall it yet. We were gathering calvy heifers from a close and handy pasture. Bus rode Bronco Woody because he had a lot to learn. One heifer broke. They ran to head her, held their ground, and stopped disaster. With dew claws cut in circles, they beat that cow at every turn. So she ran blind for the willows. Bus and Woody had to race her, nose to nose and pushing shoulders as she made her frantic try. And they pushed her in a circle till she quit and they could face her. Because Buster didn't weaken, and Woody did not let her by. Now, I watch him strain to shuffle. I touch the rifle beneath my seat. It's a friend to suffering horses. And at this range I couldn't miss. He'd find green pastures in an instant. For my dad, I'd do it neat. He'd never hear the whisper. He'd never feel that nozzler's kiss. But the cranes have come. They're dancing. The spring sun melts away the snow. Oh, I know. I'll need that rifle on some cold November day, but for a sorrel colt who beat a ringy heifer long ago, believe I'll go about my business till this feeling goes away. Rod McQuarrie.
Regarding Buck Ramsey, and though there came a time when he no longer could saddle with crew on still frosty mornings, there also came a time when he could ride with abandon into places inaccessible even to the most daring and well-mounted of riders, through valleys of eloquence, among the lofty crags of heightened language, returning from his rides in the wilderness of words with tales that would be told over and over by those of the cowpunch ilk, holding court from his wheeled throne, brandishing stringed scepter. This poet's icon, this mentor to those of the clan, seeking to gather wild remnant words into holdups. Buck is best known for his great poem, Grass, beginning with Anthem. I'd like to do a little piece of Buck's that has a couple of different titles. The title I prefer is Bum Thinking, Nowhere Near a Horse. If you see me sitting sorrowful, all busted and stove up, and you wonders how a puncher gets that way, I can tell you from the start off to avoid all work aground if you ropes and rides a horseback for your pay. It's all right to shoe your horses and braid and mend your gear, all that work afoot that keeps you in the saddle, but your mind gets misdirected when you try your hand at chores beneath stomping out some broncs or punching cattle. Now and then old Major Domo would come roust me during slack and suggest I patch his roof or plow his garden or do some post hole digging or scale some tall windmill. But I'd always answer, please, I beg your pardon. But it so happened that one Sunday I was early in from town and was holding down the bunkhouse all alone when the boss man done convinces me if I'd pull just one small chore, tacking shoes on next day could be quicker done. Says them shoes are in a whiskey keg up in the barn hayloft, standing right next to that hayloft pulley door. Though it took all 5 to hoist them up, I figures coming down, all that gravity is worth the other 4. I was nowhere near a horse, and yet it made good sense to me. So I dons my chaps and spurs and grabs him a rope. Then I ambles to the barn, up the ladder to the loft, thinking I can get this job done in a lope. So I straps a big old jug knot tie around that whiskey keg and runs the rope out through the pulley to the ground. Then I delicately balances that barrel on the edge and hurries out to gently let her down. I runs the rope around my tail and takes a hitch in front to control the downward progress of the barrel. Then I gives the jerk that tips that barrel out the hayloft door. That's the insult that begins this little quarrel. See, that whiskey keg of horseshoes had to weigh 400 pounds, more than twice what I would weigh all wet and dressed. So when I tell you that the rope hitched and slipped up under an arm, well, I figure you can guess most of the rest. I plumb parts the earth quite suddenly, a blasting for the sky, till I meet the barrel halfway up the barn. This wreck impedes my progress some, but it ain't slowed for long before I'm heading for that pulley in the yard arm. When the barrel hits the bottom and my poor head hits the top and rings that pulley like a midway gong where the fellers swing the hammer for to show off for the girls, you might think the wreck's all over. But you're wrong. See, the crashing of the barrel weighted down with all that steel caused the bottom to bust out and dump its load. So I'm plummeting from heaven now about the speed of sound, and I'm speeding on a dangerous dead-end road. That devil barrel slaps me blind and sideways one more time as it flies up and I'm crashing down. And you'd think this stubborn incident would be about played out when I bust a few more bones there on the ground. No. The rope goes slack. The hitch unhitches. I lie gazing up. Then I shuts my eyes and gives me up for the dead, because the last thing that I see before I wakes all splinted up is that cussed barrel coming for my head.
I can just see Buck doing that poem. J.B. Allen is who I'm going to try to do a piece of his work here. J.B. was my friend. This is a book he has called The Medicine Keepers, and has an inscription that says, "Friendship cherished, and was it ever indeed?" J.B. was kind of a serious fella, but he had a great sense of humor, and I have to tell this little story about J.B. and Margaret. It's kind of hard to think about J.B. without thinking about Margaret, too. And they came to my home. We had a little poetry get-together in Santa Fe, New Mexico when I was living there, and I'd waited 12 years for a fully carved, flowered Dale Harwood saddle. And I was pretty proud of it. I had it on a rack in the house. And J.B. came in. J.B. was a Texas cowpuncher his whole career, and a saddle was a rough out with bulldog taps. And so he looked that all over, and he checked out the carving and looked at the silver and looked up at me and said, "Have you got a working rig anywhere?" That evening when we went to the theater to do our poetry show, J.B. and Margaret rode together, and I had parked behind the theater in a pretty narrow spot. And when J.B. and Margaret, who arrived after I did, came in, I could see there was a little tension, which is rare with married couples. But that's probably why I noticed it. And anyway, we did our show that night, and JB says, "Got to tell you something." And I said, "What is it, JB?" And he said, "I hit your truck on the way in here." And Margaret said, "I told you there wasn't enough room, JB." So I have this beautiful little bump. It's real symmetrical on my fender of my Ford, and I've never had it fixed because it reminds me of JB. Anyway, this is called Square Pegs. Some mavericks never cease to pine when freedom's gate is shut, while they wither from effects of constant strife, gazing always toward the distant hills with longing in their guts till frustration finally snuffs the flame of life. The wheels of time and circumstance have ruined to many a man and left him crushed like grain beneath a stone. For the ones that's heard the calling down the length of history spanned, who rode the point and always led the others on. Their ways could stand no boundaries, living always on the edge, while milder folk accepted rules and fence. Till there weren't no worlds to conquer and the roads were lined with hedge in a system that just never made no sense. Well, the cowboys from an older time are men who fit the mold, and some still render homage to that creed. But the world has changed so quickly, Snake Eyes seems forever rolled, as realities outweigh our spirit's needs. Well, I'd give the world and all its gold and never bat an eye to sit a bronc at daylight on a drive, hearing sounds of brush a-popping while the wild ones make their try, doing work that makes a puncher feel alive. Them 9-to-5s will kill you, boys. There ain't no pride in that. Each day will forge another link of chain until your spirit, like an eagle's caged and walking in its scat, and no vestige of the majesty remains. J.B. Allen.
The title to this poem is Jake. Saddle your horses early, an hour before the dawn. Many miles to ride today, spring roundup's on. Now, spring roundup was a lot of work, but sometimes it was fun. When other fellows brought a child with them, they only brought a son. My dad was somewhat different. It was plain to see. The ones that he depended on were my kid brother and me. Our training had started early in that rough and rocky land, and the main requirement for us being there, that we try to be a hand. Some fellas thought a girl to be helpless. Others feared I might get hurt. Others thought it unladylike for a girl to work in all that dirt. But there was one among them on whom I could depend, a slow-talking fella by the name of Jake that I could call my friend. Jake had a little outfit far to the west of ours. He brought his horses every spring. There was no need for cars. The horses that he rode were small to pack so large a man, but there was no doubt in anyone's mind that Jake was a real top hand. Just working cattle slow and easy, sometimes showing me how to use my head to save my horse and figure the right place to be. And when the talk around the campfire would start to getting rough, Jake was the first to tell them when they had said enough. Now I have children of my own, and gone is open range, but the friendship and respect I have for Jake will never change.
I traveled with Sonny Hancock for 20-some years all the way back to Washington, D.C. And I don't know, for you who didn't know Sonny Hancock, he was the meanest looking man you ever saw in your life. But what a great guy, and humorous as heck. It was back in Washington, D.C., they hired Sonny and I to do a show back there for, I don't know, some big poetry association. They come from all over the world. And they had a panel set up there was 8 of us on this panel, and Senator Joe McCarthy was the MC, and there was quite a few people in this pretty good sized room. And he introduced everybody. Sonny and I was the last 2. And for every 2 people, there was 1 microphone. So everybody that he introduced first had a bunch of initials in front of their name, like PhD and whatever else educated people have. And it got down to Sonny, and he leaned over and he says, "My name's Sonny Hancock from Lakeview, Oregon. I got a BS degree from the School of Hard Knocks." So I leaned over and said, "I'm Jesse Smith." And like I went to the same school Sonny did. And the only initials in front of my name was Mr. MR, I guess. But, so this gal from the real deep South, she had a real deep Southern accent, says, and they're asking questions about writing poetry to these PhD people. And she said, "What do you call it when you try to write and you can't write and you can't think of nothing to write and you cries and then all of a sudden some night you might wake up and you write so prolifically and you just cries and you write and you write and you write." Nobody said a word. Sonny leaned over and he says, "Honey, where I come from, it's called PMS." And the only 2 people that laughed was me and Joe McCarthy. This is a true story, and just kind of the way things were back when Sonny was kind of getting growed up. And I bought a cheat sheet because there's 2 verses here I kind of mess up on, so I'm afraid he'll come down and haunt me if I mess up. I was raised back in the Depression. Times was pretty bad. Guess I got the occupation of punching cattle from my dad. Way down yonder in the cedar breaks on little greasy sack outfits, it was mostly held together by hard work and hair and spit. Don't know how it was where you were raised, but out in my part of the West, about the time you get your weaned, it was time to leave the nest. Because just one man's all the labor these little outfits seem to need, and a big old kid like me around, just another mouth to feed. That suited me all right, because school seemed mighty slow, and I thought by then I knew about all a man was supposed to know. And I knew that punching cows, that's where I'd make my stand, because by that time I was pretty sure I was quite a hand. Well, there's jobs aplenty. You could find them by the score. It was right there in the middle of that Second World War. And most outfits around was glad to give you coffee, meat, and beans with all the cowboys in the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines. So I had a salty outfit I heard was tougher than a cob. Boss said, "Unload your saddle, kid, you found yourself a job." Well, then he started talking horses. Well, he must have read my mind, because he asked me, "Can you ride that old high-stepping kind?" I answered him in a voice that wasn't meek or small, and I said, "I figure that's the kind that suits me the best of all. I like 'em energetic, and that's the kind I'd pick, because I was built plumb forked, kind of like a witching stick." Well, that outfit, they'd been breeding up their horses quite a spell, and they kept the kind they figured suited these parts pretty well. They wanted speed and quickness, but also they wanted something big and stout, but also they needed speed and quickness for the catch and work a cow. So they got some big thoroughbred remount studs to start that herd of theirs, and they bred them to some great big feather-legged percheron mares. Oh man, they were catty. Near outpull a truck, they'd make them big old circles, and hot dang, they sure could buck. Well, the first morning we had breakfast quite ahead of dawn. Boss man led me out a horse that his name was Leprechaun. I asked him, why'd you name him that? He said that the reason's pretty clear. If you don't take his head right quick, it's apt to disappear. He said, while you're riding out today, I want you to look around. You'll see there's a lot of little holes been poked into the ground. They weren't put by badgers or prairie dogs, he said. If you'll note, they're about the same size as a bragging cowboy's head. Well, I rode that horse that day down through valleys over knolls. I didn't gather many cattle, but man, I drilled a lot of holes. And all fall around the rope corral, you had to look out, you see, because every morning it was raining, mostly raining me. It was plumb entertaining when I heard, I've already screwed it up. All fall around the rope corral, you had to look out, you see, because every morning it was raining. It was mostly raining me. Oh, doggone it. Yeah, where's Alice when I need her? And all them other cowboys started following me around. You know the reason why? They figured I was taking lessons, learning how to fly. It was plumb entertaining when I heard some feller say he allowed as I was flying a little further every day. Another boy piped up with a Sunday school smirk. He said, kid, your flying's plumb amazing. But man, your landing sure need work. Then the conversation took another nasty little twist when the cook said he thought he might ought to add some birdseed to his list, because if I kept on flying and it looked as if I might, he could scatter some along the ground for the time I chose to light. I don't know why I didn't quit. Surely wasn't pride. Hell, I lost all that when I couldn't find no horses I could ride. Nor the reason wasn't all them wrecks and spills I took, and I was either peeled or bruised up some most any place you'd look. I guess the reason was that if I didn't stick around and I let them run me off, I knew I'd never live it down. So then I thought it over, and I reckoned as of how I was the one that called the dance tune, so I'd pay the fiddler now. No matter what you're doing, whether it's hard or tough, you're bound to get some better if you practice long enough. And let me tell you, partner, out amongst them rocks and cactus, them old pony was making sure I got a lot of practice. But then one early morning, I pert nearly crowed when a big black horse took to me, and I finally got one rode. But it weren't no time for crowing when I heard some feller drawl, that old horse thought there was 3 or 4 up there, and he couldn't throw you all. Then the jigger boss said to me, with kind of a sideways glance, quit whipping on them horses' head with the butt end of your pants. But an old horse took to me one day out on the road deer ground, and I heard somebody holler, hey kid, your butt's getting out around. So my luck had got some better. At least it was, as of late, I wasn't spending quite all my time cluttering up the real estate. When the wagon pulled in that fall, it was snowy, cold, and damp. I asked the boss what my chances were for a winter job in camp. Well, he looked at me a minute, searching like and slow. By the look he had on his face, I thought he was about to tell me no. But he scratched his head a little, and he bit himself off a chew, and he said, well, now, young feller, I'll just tell you what I'll do. He said, I got a camp still open over on the Peach Spring side. I just might let you have it and some horses you can ride. Because I think you'll make a cowboy, at least that's my suspicion, and I'll keep you through the winter, but just on one condition. He said, this outfit, or any outfit that a man is apt to find, is always going to have some of them old high-stepping kind. So I want you to promise me that as you go down the pike, you'll never tell nobody else that's the kind you like. Well, I looked down at my 2 boot toes and I uttered my assent, and I've worked a lot of outfits since, but no matter where I went, I just tried to lead what they let out, never pay no mind. But I never again said I like that old high-stepping kind. Sonny Hancock.
Throughout the early teens and early 20s, Tom Mix made a lot of cowboy movies in my hometown of Prescott, Arizona. And my grandfather, Gail Gardner, wrote a little ditty called Real Cowboy Life that I think was inspired by Tom Mix and all those movie stars. Goes like this. You have heard those cowboy stories about their life so wild and free. I expect that you could tell me what a cowboy's life should be. Whoa, he rescues lovely maidens and he shoots the rustlers down. He wears a fancy outfit and he paints up every town. You can see him in the movies. He's a highfalutin swell, a riding ringtail pinhose and always raising hell. But now let me tell you something about this cowboy life so free. It ain't no bed of roses, you can take a tip from me. No, there ain't no handsome cowboys nowhere I've ever been. For a real top-notch vaquero is just homelier than sin. And all cowboys have their troubles, a few of which I'll name, to show you that cow punching is a mighty sorry game. When the roundup starts in April, the first job you undertake is to shoe up all your horses till you think your back will break. And now then you can be a center or a Remy if you will. That was a reference to a center was a buckaroo from up north riding a saddle that had one cinch right in the middle, using a real long rope. And a Remy was a cowpuncher from the Southwest, riding a double-rigged rimfire saddle, using a short, tied-off rope. There was a lot of controversy then about which method was better, and I'm sad to say that controversy has yet to be resolved today. Now then you can be a center or a Remy if you will. It don't make any difference, you will have your troubles still. When you take your dally welties, you can lose a lot of hide. But if you fail to get 'em, you have surely got to ride. Or you tie her hard and solid and then throw away the slack. If your steer should hub a sapling, you are sure to lose the pack. And when you get a wild bunch drifting straight down for the home corral, there will something spook the leaders and your whole bunch go to hell. You build to an Orahana for to tie him in a rush. An Orahana was a long ear. That comes from the Spanish oreja, meaning ear. And anytime you branded something, you earmarked them too, because the hair would get real long and cover up a brand, or if they were hiding in the bushes, you couldn't see them. The state of Arizona said that all Orahanas that weren't running with the cow belonged to the state of Arizona. But any self-respecting cowman kind of viewed an Orahana like a unexpected stock dividend. And they were kind of honor-bound to get them if they could. You build to an Orahana for to tie him in a rush, but your pony turns a knocker and he throws you in the brush. And now your long ears in the thicket, your dogs have plumb give out, and the only thing that you can do is cuss and cry and shout. As you ride away and leave him, you can hear the critter bawl, and you know some feller'll get him, for the road here comes next fall. Then you have a real hard winter, and your cows all try to die. You ride out every morning, and to lift them up you try. You can get one by the handle, and lift and heave and strain. With a mighty awful struggle, you can tail her up again. You try to leave her standing, but she charges you in high. Then she breaks down in the middle, so you leave her there to die. On the range there's not a yearling that is fat enough for meat. You're all burned out on bacon and the beans ain't fit to eat. When you've cowboyed for a lifetime, here is all 'twill do for you. Some busted ribs and shoulders and a hip knocked down or two. If you ever have a youngster and he wants to foller stock, the best thing you could do for him is brain him with a rock. Or, if rocks ain't very handy, you could shove him down a well. Do not let him be a cowboy, for he's better off in hell. And you may swear you'll never ride again. You know you will not fail till you hear a caveata come a-jingling down the trail. Then you pack up all your soogans and you prepare to pull your freight, for you know you're just a cowboy and your head ain't screwed on straight.
This is a poem by my friend Rod McQuarrie. If life were just one April day and I should wake one afternoon to feel the sunshine on my shirt, I'd marvel with my newborn eyes at the beauty I had never seen. If life should be an April day, I'll not pine for a morning loss, nor mourn some teenage innocence, but hand in hand, my love and I will lift one cup for fallen friends. And when our business is done, we'll let wrinkles frame our eyes as we laugh and celebrate the evening time. Thank you.
I would have been grateful to have known Sue Wallace better than I did. So it's a real great honor to get to read one of her poems this evening. And you know, it might sound a little odd, but if all that had happened in Elko this year was for me to have found this poem, it would have been about enough. The first line of the poem is the title. Cattle, horses, sky, and grass, these are things that sway and pass before our eyes and through our dreams, through shiny, sparkly, golden gleams within our psyche that find and know the value of this special glow that only gleams for those who bleed their soul and heart with utter need into the mighty throbbing earth from which springs life and death and birth. These cattle, horses, grass, and sky dance and never die. They circle through the realms of air and ground and empty spaces where a human being can join the song, can circle too, and not go wrong. Amidst the natural pulsing forces of sky and grass and cows and horses. This chant of life cannot be heard. It must be felt. There is no word to sing that could express the true significance of how we wind through all these hoops of earth and mind, through horses, cattle, sky, and grass, and all these things that sway and pass. Sue Wallace.
I got kin folks back in places like, well, my mother was from West Virginia, and my father was from Oklahoma. And when they moved to Lubbock,
we'd hit the end of the earth. But East Texas has its own kind of way of doing things, and we got some Texas people with us, and I really didn't know anything about cowboy poetry, to tell you the truth. I was 30 years old and hadn't heard any, and I moved to Colorado and when I was 35, and I ran into a guy named Niall Henderson, and he was writing cowboy poetry. And I had by then been writing what we would call rhyming verse, because I thought I was a songwriter and found out I wasn't. That's one of those things you have to learn. So I was turning some of these stories I told into poems. I was making them rhyme because I knew I had to make them rhyme, and it sort of gave you a proprietary interest in a story you were telling. People couldn't steal it because it rhymed. And in 1980, I escaped for about a week. Red Steiger called up, and I was not in a good position in my life, and he said, I want you to come down here. He said, I'm doing a show, and I want you to come down here, and I've just built a new office, and I want you to come down and be a part of it, because I'm going to put one of your songs on my next CD. I was starving to death for anything like that. And so I went down there, and I spent a week with him, where I met Reba McEntire. But while I was down there, he took me out on the porch on Sunday. We spent the week there, and he had a show in Fort Worth at that theater, and he and Reba McEntire, and there was this old guy there, forgot his name, but he claimed he was that guy on the Coors poster. I didn't know any different, and what we would do is they would do a performance every afternoon for 3 or 4 days in that Fort Worth auditorium that many of you know about. And me and this guy's name was Joel, not our Joel, this was another guy. And my duty was we held the horses. Red and Reba would ride in, and they'd ride around this big stage out in the middle, and then they'd come back, and since Joel had the best deal, he got to hold Red's horse, and I had to hold Reba's. And then when the deal was over with, we'd run out there and take them their horses, and they'd spin around, and we'd walk off. So we did that all week, and we visited and hung out, and then he took me out on the porch, because I was doing he had me there to do a poem or two, and, I just, at the tip of a hat, all of us will do that. But he introduced me to this little book. He said, let me read this to you. So he read a poem, and he said, here, read one to me. And I read it back to him, and we read this whole book, and it was the first time that I experienced what poetry was supposed to be like. And his version was the East Texas version, but it also fit my Okie people and my hillbilly relatives. So this is Carlos Ashley. And this is the very book that Red Steiger gave me. He said, I want you to take this book. And I said, Red, I can't take your book, for crying out loud. No, he said, I want you to have it. And I said, well, I don't feel right. I said, I don't even know you that well. I'm just a friend. And he said, Baxter, you can't be more than friends. So I cherish this book. It's signed by Red Steiger and dated the spring of 1980. And one of Carlos's poems I'll read to you. It's called The Widder. It gets kind of lonesome out on the divide with never a woman around. So about twice a week I saddle old Belle and ride down the canyon to town. I've been sort of courting a widder down there, though I ain't never out and proposed. We've been a maneuvering and sparring around. And we had the deal just about closed. Of course, a man must be cautious where women's concerned. It's a trail over mighty thin ice. I've been living single for 52 years, while a widder, she been married twice.
Now, these females is mighty peculiar at times and awful deceitful to figure, and the things that seem little before you get hitched, next morning may look a heap bigger. So I've been debating this matter since fall, which in fact was the last time I seen her. But the sap started rising early that spring. And the grass and the trees all look greener than I could remember since I was a kid. And the bluebonnet's bigger and bluer. And the reasons for living out here all alone seem to fade and grow fewer and fewer. The trail down the canyon seemed smoother that day, and the mockingbirds sing a lot louder. And it might have been me, or the moon being full, or the smell of her perfume and powder. Or it could be her cooking that lulled me to sleep, them wonderful biscuits and pies, or her tender melodious voice as she sang with a heavenly light in her eyes. Well, whatever it was, sure done the job. I was just getting ready to ask her when all of a sudden the front doorbell rang. And who do you reckon? The pastor. Well, maybe I'm too suspicious of women's folks' ways, but I sure know a church by its steeple. And I know every preacher on top side of the earth is dead set on marrying people. Sight of that feller give me a cold chill. My pulse took to jumping and pounding, him sister and brother and all over the place. I felt for a fact like I was drowning. And my heart turned to cat when that parson walked in. The sweat started wilting my collar, and that room was a furnace plumb baking my brain. And I knowed I was going to holler, and I was just getting set for one desperate lunge from a hat across the room on the dresser when the voice of an angel came out of the night. Old Belle was a nickering. God bless her. I lied to the widder. My horse wasn't fed. The air outside was a tonic outside. And I rode all that night, and I didn't slow down till I got back out on the divide. And I reckon I'll stay here the rest of my days. I ain't going back into town. I'll take mine a batchin' and pampering old Belle. We don't need no woman around.
I'm going to do some poems from a man named Gene Randalls. If you go in the Folklife Center and you look at the poster that had the pictures of all of us from 1987, and you count 7 over and 2 down, you'll find the owl-like smiling face of Gene Randalls and maybe laugh at another one of the verses in this poem. Gene Randalls was a real deal. He grew up riding the creeks in eastern Colorado. I heard him say about his epic poem that it was about 2 young boys who went through the Depression, the Dust Bowl, and a war together and had a pretty good time doing it. I've combined lines from 2 poems. I think Gene would have forgiven me for messing with his verses. Snug sod house delivered me, the spring blizzard delivered me to a snug sod house on the Rickery. My dad grazed Hereford cattle here, among badger, hawk, and mule-eared deer. Then a spotted pony set me free to ride the black wolf, the dry willow, and the Rickery. I found an unglazed pot one day, and when I raised it from the clay, with strange design pressed in the clay, and when I raised it from the sand, I think I touched the potter's hand. 1 year on the Black Wolf, the doings got so dry, we was burning stickers off a cactus, trying to get some cattle by. That's when I put my saddle in a sack, said I'll rustle up a job of work and send some money back. Stumpy Johnson come along. As a friend, he was the best. Said I better go along, you might get lost away out west. We grabbed a handful of boxcar, headed north and west. Found a job working broncs for Curly Best. Stumpy called me Hooter, and when I asked him why he does, he said I looked just like a hooter, so a hooter's what I was. On the way, some tush hogs tried to rob us. We was fighting for our life, till Stumpy dropped the one what had the Barlow knife. Oh, I know they'd have done for us, but the memory lingers sour, throwing them tramps off that train running 60 miles an hour. When they started in the hay and we got them half-wild horses in, they just used them through the hay and they stayed wild as wind. Stumpy got sorghum and molasses, a nice matched sorrel team. Curly said to watch them. They was spoiled and quick and mean. We hooked them to a mower. Old Stumpy got aboard, gathered up his lines and hollered, "Praise the Lord." Then he cut a donut and he cut himself a ring. Hat brim blowed black fast, you should have heard that mower sing. Stumpy Johnson managed with a run and start to turn a McCormick Deering mower into McCormick Deering parts. Stumpy come a limping back, his hat brim riding on his ear. Looked at Curly standing there and said, "Well, I got that team broke. You want me to break another pair?" I got a rope on sorghum and molasses followed too. Curly said, "They'll be okay. They'll settle down." I guess they was harness strung out down the valley a mile or two. We stayed on with Curly till the spring of till late fall in 41. Then it was time to get some traveling done. Curly wrote us a recommend. Said it might help along the way and thought it only fair to tell us what he had to say. Said it working out the rough string, you two ain't the worst. We had a lot of fun betting which of you would buck off first. But at junking good machinery, you are by far the best. From Rio Grande to the Powder River, you're living legends of the West. We felt a little bad rolling into Cheyenne. War had put a damper on the sun. It was December 7th, 1941. The color bearer had the Pine Tree flag, and written on it as if for luck, was a little legend, Powder River, let her buck. We joined the Powder River 91st right there on the spot. Kind of liked that little flag. Figured it'd be lucky, like as not. The war's end was coming on when they handed me the bill. Opened up with 88s and blew me off the hill. Stumpy drugged me off the mountain. With all the scrap iron in my body, I must have weighed a ton. Sarge was killed at Landon, or I'd have had some fun telling him they got my helmet, pack, and rifle, but they didn't get my gun. When we got back to the Black Wolf, things was all out of focus for a while. My dad had bought more land. He said it was past time to quit playing cowboy. The war was over now. Time to learn to be cowman. Stumpy stayed with us for a while and drifted on his way. I think of the things we've done nearly every day. My grandson rode with me today. We talked of many important things, like willow whistles and fairy rings. Let him grow roots into this land, then 4 square rooted, he can stand and look in the face of any man and say, this I think, and this I am. And when the world has wrung him out, taught him fear and how to doubt, he could look deep within his heart to me, and we'll ride the black wolf, the dry willow, and the arickaree. Those were the words of Gene Randalls, and we thank you, Mr. Randalls. When we were putting this show together, I was afraid, very afraid, that it would end up being so sad that you folks would all just cry and cry, because it would turn into a cream for friends we've lost over the years. But these people on this stage are so good at what they do that they figured this out. I was also afraid that with so many of us on the stage, we would use up so much time that you'd all be starving to death before the show was over. What has happened is they have kept this thing on schedule, and we have a lot of time. And I would just like to start back with Chris, where we started in the first, and he knows 2 poems, I think.
Well, I'd like to do another Larry McWhorter poem. This is one that Larry told me one time. He said, this is a poem that I wish I had heard as a young man rather than having to write as an older man. It ain't the way your dear old sainted daddy worked a cow. Well, it's good to know you listened in those days. But Button, you ain't taking orders from your daddy now, so open up your mind to learn new ways. You came out here a hunting work. They never sent for you. They hired you because we needed extra help. And we don't give a hoot in hell what you think of this crew, so just keep your darned opinions to yourself. The road that brought you to our world can dang sure take you back where you can work in ways which you believe. But I've watched you, kid, and I like your style. You're cowboy to the bone, so really, son, I'd hate to see you leave. But you need to understand that we do some things the way we do because they work for us, and they have for years. Tradition runs deep in our heart just like it does in yours. Hell, kid, we ain't your competition, we're your peers. I know it ain't my rightful place to talk to you this way. I ain't your dad, nor do I sign your checks. But I've traveled the same road you're on, and haughtiness don't pay. And if you ain't got friends, life can get complex. I know it ain't all your fault. I've watched them jerk your chain. That kind of treatment you'll have to expect. The price of being different, boy, is seldom without pain, especially when you're young and seeking respect. But barking back at barking dogs, that just makes a lot of noise. Remember, son, you represent your people and your land. And you don't have one thing to prove to any of these boys except that you just want to make a hand. So peel your eyes, unplug your ears, and shut that trap of yours. You'll find the world's a better place to live if you'll learn a little something watching others do their chores, and at least respect advice that they might give. Because no one way works every time. There is one way always the best. Variety, my boy, is the spice of life. The ability to change will help you pass some of life's toughest tests. You best learn that before you take on a wife. Now, clear your shoulder of that chip. Cease your moans and wails. Learn from us. Heck, we might even learn from you. After all, our goal's the same, and that's just to get them across the scales. Well, I've said enough. Let's go. We've work to do. Larry McWhorter.
Ross, can you do Howard Parker's horse trading? Huh? Don't you? Yep. All right.
The long-eared bull was 3 years old. He was swift, cunning, strong, and bold. His horns were wide and his neck was full, and he walked with pride, this long-eared bull. He bellowed the notes of his challenge call till he echoed back from the mountain wall. One day there chanced to hear him sing a puncher who dangled a wicked string. When he caught a glimpse of the singer's ears, his lips went shut like a pair of shears. For they were both untouched and they stood out wide. He knew that no brand adorned that hide. He made quite sure that his cinch was tight, for he knew he was starting a full-grown fight. And he built the loop for a hasty swing, and he spurred his horse toward the mountain king. And away they went like a pair of deer, the buckaroo and the big long-ear. Well, he cut down the distance yard by yard till the bull figured out he was crowded hard. When he thought he'd retreated far enough, he turned about with a charge and a snuff. Well, a cow horse dodged with a sidewise leap. The cowboy threw, but he caught him deep. Yes, he caught the bull with a shot pouch hold. On the ground the horse and the rider rolled. The cowboy seen that it was no use, so he dropped his dallies and he turned him loose. And away went the bull like a prairie gale with a dragging rope and a waving tail. Well, the cowboy hung his head in shame. He'd lost his rope and his horse was lame. His hands were skinned, his clothes was torn. He'd gone for wool, but he'd come back shorn. If either of them had got the wool, the honors lay with the long-eared bull. Now a fat old cowman came one day, riding a gentle old flea-bitten gray. Now this wise old gentleman had a hunch he could humor him in if he took the bunch. So he worked him along at an easy pace and avoided all signs of a fight or a race. Stayed well back and circled wide to corral that bull and brand his hide. But just as they got where the brush was thick, the long-eared bull threw a trump on the trick. When he got in the open, the bull was gone, and the rest of the bunch just ambled on. Now a beardless youngster, lithe and slim, was riding one day by the canyon rim. The happiest youngster in the land. For just 1 week he'd owned a brand. He saw the bull. How he smiled, for the soul of a cowman was in that child. He descended the hill with a cheerful heart, little knowing the fight he'd start. His horse had been ridden some before, but was barely wise to the hackamore. Yet he felt his pulses throb with hope as he tied the end of his old grass rope. Well, over the saddle horn he humped, he took to the race when the long-ear jumped. He was one of the kind that never leaned back. He just spurred his old pony and pitched him the slack. And he built a loop that was big and wide, and he made a throw, but the bronco shied. Then he sat right back, and he buried his tail in the butt and thought that he had hooked a whale. Down went the horse. The youngster fell, and he used some words that don't print well. Well, the kid was white, but his blood was up, and he stayed with the fight like a bulldog pup. As they bucked and bellowed, plunged and pulled, this bronco horse and the long-eared bull, for his rope was tied to the saddle big, was cinched with an old-time rimfire rig. Well, the horse went bucking off to the right. To the left, the long-ear took his flight. They took up the slack, and the two of them flopped right down on their backs, and the old rope popped. But the kid was there with an agile spring, his teeth still clenched on his hogging string, and he won by a hair, for he didn't fail to get a hold of the long-ear's tail. And he tied him down, and he swelled with pride as he ran his brand on that glossy hide. Now this youngster has lived to be old and gray. He's been successful in every way. And it wasn't by luck. And it wasn't by a pull. It was by the spirit that branded the long-eared bull. Bruce Cascavin, thank you.
I'm going to do another one of JB's poems called Wisps. He sits by a battered old table that rivals his 70, surface worn smooth by the cups, and the plates, and the sleeves of forgotten old men. Fire casts its light across the crags of his face and fights for its space on the wall where shadows are dancing with old memories to the tune of the night herder's call. The wind draws the specters of happier times through the cracks in the weathered old door, and coffee grows cold in a lone rusty cup while mice play their games on the floor. Unconsciously easing the pain in his hip from broncs better fed to a dog, a smile wipes the frown from the depths of his eyes, and it scatters the withering fog. Indelible choices dictated his trail, whose ending was known in advance. For youngsters absorbed by the smoke and the dust rarely linger to finish the dance. Accepting the fate fortune dealt to the game, he rises to welcome the sun. Another day started in silence alone, forgetting what might have been done. Old time don't diminish the crux of a choice, though our circumstance may cloud the view. But things that we wish might have been or could be seldom travel with things that we do. J.B. Allen.
We were up in Nevada, up in the northern part at Lida. The range was overrun with Mustangs. We had an absentee owner that wouldn't send the check. And the boss's wife, well, the foreman's wife would come to me and she'd say, Georgie, I'm really getting low on groceries. Why don't you and my husband go catch a load of them horses? There was Mustangs all over that country. So this is a poem that came from that. An old Nevada Mustang, as wild as she could be, I'll tell y'all for sure, made a gambler out of me. I forgot I was a mother, forgot I was a wife. I bet it all on the horse I rode. On him I bet my life. The thrill of the chase and my roan horse trying to give me a throw, the smell of the dust and the sagebrush, the rattle of rocks as they roll. Blood running hot with excitement, mouth getting dry from the same. Ain't nothing in the world but the Mustang, the roan horse mean the game. Mustang's getting winded, slows down to a lope. My roan horse begins to weaken, then the Mustang gets caught in my rope. Roan horse's sides are heaving, me, I'm all out of breath. The Mustang faces the rope a trembling, it would have run to its death. Then sanity returns, and I'm looking at this wild horse I just caught. My prize of the chase, good looking or pretty, she's not. She got a hammer head, crooked hind legs, she's awful short on the hip, little pig eyes, scrawny neck, she's really long on the lip. No, she sure ain't worth much, for sure she ain't no pearl, but she took me away from a humdrum life and right to the edge of the world. Now Mustanging, it's a fever, like alcohol, gambling, and such. So I guess it don't really matter if what you catch ain't worth that much. This is before the laws were passed to feed city folks romantic dreams. I got to enjoy the greatest sport of all, of cowboys and of kings.
Here's another Sonny Hancock poem, and I don't know, it might be true. I was up in the Sycan Black Hills camp, riding for the old Z Cross. This is my own piece of country because I was cook, crew, and boss. The afternoon of that there year was coming on, best I recall, meaning summer'd hit the Cap Rock and slid right down into fall. Days were warm and pleasant, but the nights were getting sharp. But I had a nice snug little cabin to keep the cold wind off my tarp. Aspen leaves were turning yeller and bees buzzed around the hive. And just one of them times of the year, I guess, is great to be alive. So I'm jogging along this morning, looking out beneath my hat. Thought I'd make a little circle down through Silver Dollar Flat. Maybe brand some big slick yearling with the address of this farm, because I sure did need to limber up my old stiff roping arm. So far, I'm kind of trotting down this little open draw when I come around the corner. You can't believe this thing I saw. I pulled up at gawking, my eyes went plumb agog. There's a big old brindled he-bear digging ants out of a log. My old heart commenced pounding and I couldn't get no air. I knew I'd never have a better chance to rope myself a bear. I tried to get my rope down, my old horse began to dance, but that old Bruin, he ain't seen me yet, he's busy digging ants. So I tired off hard and solid and I said a little prayer and I let out a cowboy war whoop and I built right to that bear. But now the old beast heard me coming and he's headed for the trees. There weren't no moss growing on his back, he sure did split the breeze. But I rolled right up behind him and like that Bible story's told, I cast my bread upon the water. It came back 1,000-fold. I threw my slack across his hip and I turned my pony neat and I heard him grunt when he hit the ground because I jerked him off his feet and now I'm headed for the timber. Just like it should be done. Hell, there wasn't nothing to it. Roping bears are lots of fun. But in the timber, I got busy dodging limbs and brush and such, and I ain't had a chance to check up on my cargo very much. I'll start right out by breaking him to lead, at least I'd hope. When I look back, here that bear come. Just like that, right up my rope. Well, things started looking different, and I hollered, okay, Bruin, I'll start paying more attention to this little job I'm doing. I'll just zig and zag and circle some. Now, you just follow me. I'm about to bash your brains out on some big old jack pine tree. So I zigged and zagged and circled, but it seemed to no avail. Next time I check, old Teddy's right behind my horse's tail. About that time, my old pony gave this funny little jump, and here that bear come up that rope and walked right across his rump. I yelled and squalled and hollered, and I slapped him with my hat, but that old bear, he's plumb determined he wants to be just where I'm at. I've knowed a lot of people in the hills and on the plains, and nobody ever said I'd been overblessed with brains, but it didn't take no Einstein with no special IQ, nor no call from God to tell me what that bear was apt to do. A coward's way out's a bad one, in most anybody's book. That was the only route left open, so by golly, that's the one I took. I bailed off and chucked it to him, but a big rock broke my fall. I said, it looks to me, old bear, like you just bought it all. They went crashing through the timber. That's when I realized, of course, that I just lost a damn good saddle, and the company lost a horse. How's a man supposed to tell it with the bosses standing there? You took a plumb good horse and saddle and just gave him to a bear. These thoughts and lots more like them was running through my mind as I went limping down that cow trail trying to leave that wreck behind. My clothes was torn and tattered, and I lost big chunks of hide, but my body wasn't aching near as much as was my pride. Then I hear the sound behind me, and the noise began to swell back the way that I just come from, and I wondered, what the hell? And I seen my old horse coming and stepping lively down the slope. Damned old bear sitting in my saddle, got a loop bill swinging my rope.
Sonny Hancock by Jesse Smith. How about another hand for all these great reciters of poems? Yeah, fantastic. I'd like to also thank Mr. Vess Quinlan for putting this together tonight. You know, every year in the program booklet we have a section called Empty Saddles, and it's nice to know that these saddles aren't quite so empty tonight. Thank you very much. If you'll exit in that direction, we have another show. Thanks a lot for coming tonight.